There has to be a difference between juvenile justice and adult justice. What are you finding in your research? Hardcore people say, just treat these little sons of just like you would adults and let's get on with it? Is that what you're finding?
I was 17. Then I was put in jail for 10 months, and I wasn't even a juvie. It was just a regular jail with adults and everything.
I got sentenced to NSI for a year basically because I was smoking cigarettes and I was an at-risk youth.
When I was 14, I was going, in and out of jail, sort of, up in Casper and stuff,
Well, I think the Wyoming way should be to listen to someone who's had great experience in the law, and that's Gary Hartman.
We incarcerate more kids than any other state with the exception of South Dakota.
In the United States, as a general rule, we over-incarcerate. We over-incarcerate adults and we over-incarcerate youth.
I just have to say that whoever has the power to fix this juvenile justice system in Wyoming needs to get it done.
You're working for juvenile justice reform here in Wyoming, and if I remember correctly, you actually have been involved in the system before.
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
Like the kids not necessarily don't get their voice heard. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so what I would like to see is that people really understand them and hear them out. You know what I'm saying, on what's good and bad for like their future instead of other people picking it for them.
Well, I want to see a documentary for like real people, real cold hard facts right here in Casper. I could see him walking down the street. Oh, hey, I saw you in that documentary the other week.
I mean, I'd leave it to a professional.
We have no central data place. That's sorely lacking. We have no clue on the number of kids that are hitting the system at all levels of the courts. And how does business make decisions without data?
Just simply facts. We try to find recidivism rates, all sorts of facts, and there's really nothing on Wyoming that we could find.
It's always been a great frustration working in Wyoming that we've never had the data, comprehensive juvenile justice data. And we've always asked for it, we've always wondered about how we could get it, and that's something that's never been able to occur.
You could take it both ways. You can say like, oh, the system sucks, but that's not going to get you anywhere if you just keep saying the system sucks. Sure, it does suck. We don't even know what's going on right now, like it's so secretive and stuff like that.
I tore my meniscus in my right knee, which I had to get an operation on actually. Yeah.
I think you guys should know that the system is completely messed up. I've tried to put it in the system before, and it messed me up a lot,
Cops didn't apologize to me or anything. No one didn't care.
It's your boy Impossible representing Goon Squad to the fullest.
All right. So I was really digging your song. We're going to play another one at the bottom of the next hour, so you guys are going to close out the show tonight. We're going to kick it off. I've got the Clash, Know Your Rights, and yeah, that just kind of goes with the whole theme tonight. You're listening to 93.5 KOCA.
This summer, beside the boardwalks of Atlantic City, assembles a gathering of men and women whose life work is social welfare. Among them, a group whose specialty is U.S. crime. The crime experts are formulating an ambitious project in crime prevention. Among those present are California's Kenyon Scudder.
More than half the children coming into the juvenile courts of America are just ordinary youngsters who might have been kept out of trouble if the community had done something about it.
So you have these people, and then they came out. Some were ne'er-do-wells, cowboys, railroaders, married school teachers, raised an ornery, opinionated group. Wyoming people are thoughtful, well-read, articulate, and ornery, and highly opinionated.
I was born in the state. I was reared in the state. I went to the University of Wyoming as an undergraduate. I've lived in Wyoming for over 40 years.
Well, I was invited to come here and make a presentation to the Wyoming Judiciary Legislative Committee on the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative.
If there is one thing that characterizes Wyomingites, it is a reluctance to admit that somebody from somewhere else may have a better idea. and it's time that we break free from that.
I want to talk a little bit, though, about the difference between a high-risk and a low-risk youth, because we are not letting high-risk youth out into the community. And so the list on the left there are typical offenses that we would classify high-risk. Low-risk youth, though, are those that have committed minor thefts, alcohol, drug violations, disorderly conduct, truancy, runaways, and technical probation violations.
And we need to get to the point where we say, we don't care where you're from, we don't care which part of you're from, we simply want to know what works and what does not work.
Yeah, I met Senator Simpson when I was a junior in high school and participated in the American Legion Boys State.
And when I was a kid, I had a loving brother, two dear and lovely parents, and yet I was best described as a fool, a boob, an idiot, arrogant, rebellious, mean.
We are a work in progress. We're immature. We're developing.
Some of us want to act like idiots.
Yeah, some of us want to act like idiots.
Another leader is New York's Dr. Frederick Thrasher.
Good probation and parole work are good crime prevention, but there is a more economical and a more effective way to prevent crime, and that is to nip the criminal careers in the bud.
We were destructive. We shot all the time, and we were very good, and we were very proud. So good that we shot at each other. We would get across the ravine on Sulphur Creek, see how close we could get to each other with 22 shells. That's pretty stupid. You can't get any more stupid than that.
And my memory of him is that he was a very great guy. He was warm. He was open to me, even when he learned that I was going to be doing my undergraduate at Berkeley.
Many young people, 12, 14, 16, are just plain numbskulls.
I just turned 15. You know, I was living inside a foster home. It was just real strict foster home stuff. Like, you couldn't watch anything above PG. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, movies, it was like real strict. And so I didn't like that. You know, I was like, I'm not a kid, you know? And so I left, you know, and I kept leaving. So one day they finally called the cops on me. I was listening to my CD player, and I got off the bus and I was walking and I saw the cop. He was creeping on me. I was like, all right, I know this guy's here for me. And so I took off my headphones, I put it on my backpack, and I saw that he turned. I was like, damn. And he stopped, and the one cop on the passenger side started opening up his door, and I just took off, booked it, went down an alley, hopped a fence, went down another alley.
I think early childhood education is very important. When you start talking about education at an early level, we know that if you're not reading on level by the time you're in the 3rd grade, you are at great risk for dropping out of school. Unfortunately, in Wyoming, the last scores I've seen, only 60% of the kids in the 3rd grade statewide are reading at 3rd grade level. And I find that very alarming. And I'm saying to the judges, you better gear up, because if things don't change, if that doesn't improve, you're going to see these kids when they drop out of school in the 9th, 10th, or 11th grade. Unfortunately, in Wyoming, the last scores I've seen, only 60% of the kids in the 3rd grade statewide are reading at 3rd grade level. And I find that very alarming.
There's some more science behind why teenagers take risks. There's the new plasticity in the brain. It makes teens more susceptible than adults to the external environment, which can, you know, make them more vulnerable to peer pressure and, you know, therefore commit more crimes and get incarcerated. We gotta grow, you know, we have a long ways to go still.
When I was a sophomore in high school, I stole a car and copied the key and then took the car out for lunch every week and parked it in a different place and kind of messed with the kid. So I got caught with the keys and suspended.
When I was playing basketball, we were stayed in a hotel. I was a freshman. The upper overclassmen had this thing they do. They goof around. So they all took off and ran into somebody's room that was open. Somebody was living in a hotel, not living, they was staying there overnight at a basketball game. They pulled underwear out and threw them everywhere, did all kind of stuff. Well, I wasn't involved at all. But when everybody was running down the hall, I poked my head out my hotel door to see what was going on. Well, in the process, I just looked around, like an ostrich sticking his head up. And I went back in my room. Well, then the police came. And you know who got pulled in for doing that work? Me. Well, here's the reason. It's the same reason there is a disproportionate minority contact in our state as there is everywhere, is I was the most visible. Everybody on our basketball team at that point in time was white but me. And it was up in Nebraska when I was a freshman. So when they didn't recognize anybody, they did recognize that black face.
And they're all black. There ain't a white guy in there, because the white guys go home and tell their mommy and daddy, and then somebody on the city council saves their ass. And the black guy goes to this little place.
I heard him, and then I sort of saw him at the corner of my eyes. Like, boom, 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 boom. He's going over like all like these. It's like a big old field going over like this field, and he just hit my knee. Boom, and I just flipped onto I didn't do like a flip, but he hit me, and my back hit like the hood, and I fell down, and he came out, and he like grabbed me, and he put my head like the ground, and he put my hands behind me. He's like, don't you ever run from the police again. And he locked me and went and sit to the cop car.
I was pulled over on the side of the road for no reason. They pulled me over and asked me and everybody else in my car for our driver's license. When they did that, we gave them the driver's license. They asked us to step out of the vehicle. They pat searched 2 of the Mexican boys in the vehicle. They then searched my car without a warrant.
I'm Mario Espinoza. I'm born and raised here in Rawlins, Wyoming. Been here 33 years. Have 4 children now. I run my own business. Rawlins is population around 9,000. I believe that's included with the prison population. With the prison population, probably, I don't know, over 1,000 maybe. Just because we dress like this or just because we like these type of things doesn't mean we're in a gang.
I want to be a professional football player in the NFL with the Oakland Raiders, hoping to be a safety on defense and a running back on offense.
My son actually just recently got in trouble with some graffiti.
My buddy told me that he wanted to spray paint, and I didn't feel like doing it, and stuff was going to my head, maybe if I should do it or not.
They're really good kids. They're just doing kid things, and they're all 12 years old.
If I didn't do it, maybe all my friends are calling me chicken.
We're on the south side of Rawlins right now. There was the gateway here to south side, the underpass. Before, this used to be really ugly, nothing but weeds and black cinders. In 4 years, my dad's transformed it. He's put all this work in with his own money.
I was looking across the alleyways to make sure we didn't get caught by the cops or anything.
I know back when I was in school and when my dad was young, basically if you got caught spray painting, no matter what it wasn't considered gang activity.
No, they just told me I could do the community service with my grandpa on the hill, because my grandpa works for the city council members and he works on the railroad.
Basically they handed you a paint bucket or a scrub brush and you went and washed it off, paid a fine.
I had to pay a fine of $107.
Nowadays they want to send the kids straight to the boys' home, which was in Worland, I think, probably about 4 hours away, 300 miles or what. They actually did charge my son with a felony, which I think is totally ridiculous. They charged him with 2 felony counts, one accessory to spray painting, and then also for the crime of spray painting. I think he would have learned a lot better if he would have had to go speak to the people that they committed the crime to, shovel their snow, just do whatever they had to do to make it right.
But if that doesn't work out, maybe want to go to the NBA for the Lakers, play point guard or forward.
Every year since he was a kindergartner, he's been student of the month every year.
There are aspects in Wyoming history where we think of juveniles as adults. It may stretch all the way back to the days of the open range cattle trade when lots of the open range cowboys were young boys. They were literally cowboys. These individuals would sometimes get involved in fracases in town, or they'd be involved in rustling, and so there was this sense, well, if they're old enough to run cattle on an open range, they ought to be old enough to be answerable under the laws of the territory. And
in the juvenile area, the best indication of the reluctance of the leaders of this state to look elsewhere is that for 25 years we have had virtually no changes in the juvenile justice code in Wyoming.
Some poor fellow named Basinger, I remember was his name. I met him later, even when I came back and had reformed. He said he was sitting on his porch that day and he thought there were bees. He thought there were hornets going past his head. Well, they weren't. It was shells, spent shells, because he was about a mile away, and you know, shells do come down, and when they do, they spin and they lose their velocity, but they make a noise like a bee.
We've got that sort of country spirit, you know. Damn kid, let's take care of him. Let me deal with him myself, and I'll take care of it.
This was 1948. Well, that's a long time ago. My buddies and I began to, you know, with all our shooting, we decided that we were so good that we could see how far away we could shoot a mailbox. How far away? We never shot anything up close because we were too skilled. So we just went up Diamond Basin. It was just a fusillade of shooting. On that day, when there were 72 holes in one mailbox, and you could get a $100 fine in 6 months per hole for destroying a federal property.
We're using an inordinate amount of money and resources on detention. We're using public funds to make kids worse.
Right. I think that locking up a kid who's in DFS's custody should be ruled out.
The protagonist, the hero, would be the boy, of course, going through the system. The antagonist, the Wyoming system, which, you know, got him pretty bad.
My name's Robert Dean. I'm 19. I live in Worland, Wyoming. My passion, I play guitar. I give guitar lessons, and you know, I want to get a band together, but I don't think it's going to happen here, you know.
My 4-year odyssey starting in 2003.
And I ended up staying locked up for about 4 years for doing nothing illegal, really.
Wyoming is unique in the country in putting so many kids through the adult court system, resulting in criminal records for the kids, resulting in incarceration for minor offenses.
Incarcerating kids for minor offenses is just stupid because you put them in there and all it does is breed contempt, really.
Offenses such as smoking a cigarette on the school grounds or skateboarding in front of a sidewalk in a local bar. These are cases that I've heard in court that are being prosecuted in adult proceedings.
We do not have a juvenile court system in the state of Wyoming. You don't go to a building that says juvenile court.
And when you tell people around the country that in Wyoming, young people who are committing minor misdemeanors and status offenses are being prosecuted as adults, people's jaws drop. It's amazing. It's amazing, because you are marking these children for life for something that in some cases is not even an offense.
The statistics that have been done show that in some counties, and I can recall Natrona County in particular, something like 93% of juveniles who are in the legal system are handled either in municipal court or circuit court. Those are adult courts. We don't have a kangaroo court in Wyoming. We have a kangaroo system when it comes to juveniles.
We're going to actually have you guys dress a stick man on a piece of paper as you would dress for court.
A kangaroo court is one where justice is not done.
We're troubled by the fact that so many of the kids are in jail for probation violation. I think that number is about 64%.
Why do you think it's important to, Philip, why do you think it's important to present yourself good in court?
So, I don't know, like, so the judge understands how you know how to take care of yourself and like that you're confident. And, I don't know.
Exactly. So respect for the court, respect for yourself, correct?
Precisely.
When you're trying to change behavior, sometimes you have to use a coercive approach to get that behavior changed. And so we do utilize detention on sentences or revocations for minors using alcohol.
If you don't actually try and fix the problem, all you're doing is postponing them coming back right once you release them again.
Just look conservative, put together, match, and mostly just the big thing is conservative, no low-cut shirts, nothing too revealing.
I wore scrubs to court because that's what I was wearing in jail, and they didn't give me time to change like they said they would.
Did they give you anything to change into?
No, I wore scrubs and a t-shirt in the court.
Any chains?
Yeah, I was in shackles too. Which sucked.
There comes a certain point based on behavior that detention becomes a tool to attempt to change behavior, just like with adults.
In fact, the research now demonstrates pretty conclusively that the detention and incarceration of children is actually a risk factor for continued criminality rather than a deterrent.
A child who is tried as an adult is going to have a record, just as an adult would.
Fines can be imposed on them. They can be forced to into treatment that they have to pay for, regardless of their income or ability to pay for them. And many of these kids are poor and unable to afford the cost of court-ordered treatment.
We can take you to Walmart, get you a nice shirt for $15, $20. We have ties, things of that nature. Amanda can take the ladies shopping if they need something nice to wear. The three winners are
Philip cried because he had everything picked out from the positive attitude, the tie, the shirt, the belt, and the shoes.
While a lot of courts are doing some really positive things for juveniles, there's a lot of disparate outcomes.
It's widespread throughout Wyoming that the prosecution of these young people as adults is for behavior that when I was a kid, I would be sent to the principal's office, brought to my parents for discipline, something much more appropriate than using up the expensive resources of criminal courts.
I egged a cop car.
Really?
Yes.
Did they catch you?
No, we ran.
In one county, there was a boy who was being prosecuted in an adult court for skateboarding on the sidewalk in front of the local bar.
He shouldn't be doing that, but he's trying to have a good time. You're locking him up for a good time.
In another county, I recall a young girl who was caught smoking, or actually just holding a cigarette on the school grounds across the street from the school.
My name is Victoria Jackson.
City, are your boards welcome to board?
I plan is boarding.
Okay, and so tell me, what's the worst thing you did as a juvenile?
Worst thing I ever did was I made a B on my straight A report card, and my dad looked at it and he goes, "What happened?" For real.
And you had another?
Very good. For helping children learn jail.
I observed a juvenile who had violated probation because he wasn't achieving in school adequately, and one of the inadequacies, a failure in a bowling class.
I threw some eggs at a house, which I thought was total bull, but like, it's whatever, you know?
And I thought about what happened when I was a kid, our neighbor threw eggs at my parents' house. And my parents called the police.
Well, they counted it as vandalism actually, and they were gonna actually charge me for each egg for like $500 each egg.
Hey, you kids, I'm calling the cops right now!
And the police came over, and the neighbor kids were brought into our living room, and my parents talked with them and asked them to clean the eggs off the side of the house, and if necessary, paint the side of the house.
The neighbor could have like easily came up and been like, all right, so if you can clean my house, then we can call it good, but it didn't do that, and we had to go through all this court crap.
And that's what the kids did, and they learned their lesson. And that's the kind of intervention that is effective, that makes good common sense.
A lot of kids don't understand that they're waiving their right to representation, but they do. I know that the state's public defender and guardian ad litem program is very concerned about that.
When I went to court, I had no idea what any rights were. I had no idea anything at all. I had no idea who my GAL was.
The vast majority of the kids who are being processed in adult courts are pleading guilty, often without the advice of counsel. They're waiving their right to counsel, often without having been advised by counsel of the effect of waiving that right. So we've been working with people in the state to create what a model system might look like and to draft a statute that would reflect what people's vision of a system is. And it's very exciting to create a vision.
Act 2 would start as soon as he starts getting into trouble, leading into the detention, showing what it was like to be there, the challenges inside.
A troubled kid does not deserve to be locked up. They need help.
This is Sheridan, where I got in trouble for smoking a cigarette. My stepmom had cracked my head open.
And I went to school with blood all over my head and stuff.
So they put me in a foster home in Sheridan, awaiting a court trial for me smoking a cigarette and what grew into a CHINS petition because my dad couldn't always be home. And after I went to my initial hearing, they transferred me to the group home in Sheridan, right here. When I didn't work their program the way they wanted to, they negatively discharged me and sent me back to Casper to await a bed in the Whirlwind Boys School. Now I was here for about a year this time. Shackled me around the waist and my handcuffs to the waist, and then they shackled my feet also. They put me in a van and they drove me from Sheridan to Buffalo, to Whirlwind, to Thermopolis, to Shoshone, and then finally to Casper, which took about, 8 or 9 hours. And I got moved to the group home from foster care. And the sentencing from the court on my CHINS petition was that I was going to be sentenced to a year at Normative Services Incorporated. But I would have to go to Casper first to wait for a bed to open up at Normative Services.
Wyoming has a tradition of coming kicking and screaming into compliance with federal standards.
Wyoming is the only state in the country that doesn't participate in the Federal Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. That act has been in place for 35 years and it set very, very minimum standards for states.
I think what the act is concerned with is bringing best practices and deinstitutionalizing low-risk kids.
There are 4 core requirements of the Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Act, the JJDPA. I will try to briefly summarize them. The first is that states must take a serious look at their disproportionate minority contact.
They didn't think I spoke English for some reason.
So it took me 3 hours to get booked in because they thought I didn't speak English. They didn't bother asking me.
So the disproportionate number of minority youth who are coming into contact with the system.
I went into the circuit court not too long ago for my own MIP, and well, they had these like 18 inmates come in, and all they had was like MIPs, and they were shackled, and like they treat them like crap.
They must deinstitutionalize status offenders. So status offenders are, again, young people who have committed non-criminal offenses.
In Wyoming, it is a criminal offense for a child to possess alcohol. Most other states treat that as a status offense, means it would not be an offense if it was committed by an adult.
States are not allowed, except under narrow circumstances, to put status offenders in detention or institutions.
Unfortunately, we still have judges, we still have prosecutors who like to have that hammer over the juvenile's head to say, hey, this is a criminal offense. If you violate, you can go to jail.
States must also abide by two mandates that ensure that young people do not come into contact with adult offenders.
Yeah, I was actually held at the county jail in Cheyenne, Wyoming for about like, I want to say a day I was held there for, and it was just like a holding cell, but I didn't see like I was on 2023-1, so I was only out one hour there, but the other cells around me were the same thing of older people, way older than me.
We know that the public does not like putting kids in adult jails, and that polls at 80-90% every single time we poll, no matter where we poll, no matter where in the country.
The real issue is not that we're not in compliance, but to me the real issue is that by not coming into compliance, it means that we are not treating children the way we should.
We also know that the public wants kids to be rehabilitated, and they strongly favor investments like education and job training.
If we have all this money and this grant to make this video, let's make it happen. Let's get all the people we can, everything we just...
Do you want to join our production team?
I think that Friedenthal definitely needs to be in this video.
I actually think people are making a fair amount of progress. We keep talking about how, something I want to get on the record, we keep talking about how we're out of compliance with federal guidelines. Remember, we opted out of those guidelines. So it is true, we're not complying with them, but we opted out. So we're not in non-compliance, we just didn't bother to start. Now, having said that, you have an awful lot of people who are much more focused on trying to not just comply with those with the spirit of those standards, but go beyond them.
Wyoming does need to have some standards. We need to have standards around our detention. We need to have some standards around how we decide who should be in those detention facilities.
There are people who have really tried a lot of things and can tell us and could tell us what does not work, what does work.
Who would they speak to in your organization to really get it going?
Well, that would be my boss, Bart Lubau, who is the director of the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative with the Casey Foundation.
Lexington Market.
It's a good town.
You have to say
it has its problems. Baltimore has its problems, but it's a good town.
Say ah. 8.5 hours sitting down in that class. Baltimore.
The roadmap to juvenile justice reform makes a series of recommendations for states to improve and strengthen their juvenile justice systems, beginning with the notion that there needs to be a separate juvenile court and a separate system of justice for youth who violate laws, something that we've lost sight of as a matter of policy over the past couple of decades.
I don't want to go to confession. There's too many. Not on camera. I don't know. I went streaking one year. My sophomore year around the school for a prank. It was a lot of fun.
And did you get caught?
Kinda. I didn't get in trouble. When my boyfriend's little brother was only 14 years old, he was charged with a drug possession charge. He was sentenced to the NSI school in Sheridan, Wyoming for 8 months. Then the NSI school closed down. They then
moved him to the Cathedral Home in Laramie, Wyoming, where he still resides.
Sureño actually is for the south side, and that's where I grew up. My whole life was on the south side. It's where all my friends live.
And then when they said that cops were going to come and get him and take him away or whatever, he took off running. He went outside, and those cops, threw him down and handcuffed him. I didn't think that was right because he didn't even have an adult there with him. But they weren't right at all. Marcos didn't have an adult. He was, 13 at the time? There was 3 or 4 cops, that handcuffed him. Well, they could have just got him and brought him back in.
But Marcos, it seems like they were always after him for one reason or another.
Basically, what I see now with the kids in this community really hurts me because I've seen these kids grow up. I've coached a lot of them, and they're really not bad kids.
I had 2 cops knock at my door looking for Marcos. Marcos was supposed to be at Hunter safety class. So I told them where he was, and they almost called me a liar. They said, no, he just beat up a kid pretty bad. The kid's in critical condition in the hospital. And I says, I don't think it was Marcos. Yes, it was Marcos. We have witnesses that told us it was your grandson. And I was real upset, for one thing, because I had cancer.
I don't want to just sit back year after year after year seeing these kids' lives being ruined when firsthand I know these aren't bad kids.
The first time we went to court, told Marcos, you're a threat to society. You're no good. He cut him down so bad that it penetrated in Marcos's head, I think, that he's no good. He's a threat to society. This is what the judge was always telling him. I know he had a fight in school, in the bathroom. They took him from the school straight to jail. He was in a lock-up room for 3 days.
If you ask somebody in Rollins where they went to college at, they'll tell you the Cathedral Home or boot camp.
Well, he's in the Cathedral Home in Laramie, Wyoming. And it's about an hour-and-a-half drive from here, from Rollins.
When you're transporting kids 100 miles away from their families, you're setting them up to fail. You're disconnecting them from the primary source of support that is going to ensure that they stay healthy and get back on the right track.
At first, I really liked the place. I thought it was a good place for him to be. And little by little, they kept increasing medication, telling him he's bipolar, which I disagree with that.
When I was at the boys' school, I was diagnosed with manic depressive and bipolar disorder, which I don't see that, but that's what they did. And the lithium, it caused me to see things, and I was paranoid, I thought people were talking to me when they weren't.
When I was at WBI, they gave me drugs to help with my bipolar, supposedly, and I felt like I didn't need that, I was just a kid that grew up with a hard life.
At one time, they had him on 13 different pills. 2 weeks ago, when I saw him, I did not recognize him.
I hear about these kind of cases all the time of young people who are taken out of their homes and put into treatment centers, put on excessive doses of medication, and they're not recognized by the people who grew up around them.
These kids are not sick. These kids need access to the kinds of supports and services to help them turn their lives around. And frankly, we're over-medicating and over-medicalizing children in the system.
And then when I went to NSI, there's this doctor. He actually, was giving all these kids, Seroquel and things like that, and that just hits you like a ton of bricks, man. Like you couldn't even talk after a pill. Like it was awful. And he actually, when I got out of NSI, I was at home for a little while, free, and about 2 months passed, and I got this letter in the mail saying that he wasn't actually supposed to give any kid a drug from the state, and they apologized for the inconvenience, and that was it.
I'm not a social scientist. I'm a guy that did a lot of shitty things and have shared that experience. I'm not a shrink. My experience is that when people play shrink, they're usually way off base. Find new work. Unless you are a shrink, and then you might find new work too.
He left here about 130 pounds in February. A month ago, he weighed almost 220. And he was swollen. His face was really enlarged. I did not recognize him.
You know, this gets to the issue of these medications that we really don't know yet what the long-term impacts are going to be. Excessive weight gain is absolutely a side effect of the medications, particularly the newer antipsychotic medications. So I think we need to be very careful.
I'd call him and all he would say is, uh-huh. He wasn't coherent, a lot of the conversations we had. They've just kept him pretty well drugged up.
It's easy to have short-term control over folks in a facility with medication. It's much harder to try to create a situation in which they can really thrive in the future.
But there is a lot of fear from the repercussions that possibly the police department, sheriff's department, or anybody in the system already is going to get reprimanded for continuing to talk to you guys.
Cool.
So I just wondered if I could ask you a few questions.
Well, sure.
Okay.
It's not going to be about my brother, is it?
Yeah.
I can't answer them.
Okay. Why?
Because of the court. I explained this to you before.
Okay.
I can't. I can get in trouble for that.
Once a crime has been committed and discovered, the first stage of its handling, by law, is the police arrest. Many times, the police act when they have witnessed a possible misdemeanor, and then the warrant will be obtained later. The accused is booked by entering the charges in a book. He must also submit to an examination of his clothes and person for possible evidence. In this case, he will also be subject to one or more tests to determine his level of intoxication.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I just can't.
Ollie, but the court said you couldn't do it?
That's what they told me, yeah. Or, well, the district attorney told me that I couldn't, and I'm not going to mess with the district attorney.
Okay.
I can't.
All right.
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
It's not worth my brother getting in more trouble.
We smoked some illicit drugs. It's probably the worst thing we ever did where I came from. It's so bad, I know, it's terrible.
They didn't teach you anything, you know. All you did was crossword puzzles and, you know, color pictures and stuff. It was like being in kindergarten all over again.
I didn't do anything. I learned how to do more awful things in there. I knew how to, you know, make drugs in there and stuff.
I strongly believe that anyone that goes there that didn't go there as a criminal could be turned into a criminal by their peers.
My education going through jail, I had none.
I look back on it, you know. I really wish I'd been in school and, you know, learning and getting credits and, you know, go to college and stuff. I wanted to be an architect, and I don't think that's going to happen now.
The journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. I think we ought to take this step. I think our kids deserve it. We've been messing around with this bill for 14 years.
Yes, and the two bills do two very important things. What we're trying to do is reduce the number of kids that we're putting into what we call hardware secure facilities. These are places where the bars clang and it looks like a jail. Kids don't need to be in jails. That should be reserved for kids with serious violent crimes. Otherwise, they should be in staff secure facilities, or even better yet, back to their parents.
I suggest that we do start looking at some of these bills and not just putting them aside and say, well, maybe next time we'll do it. We have had lawsuits. We've had lawsuits at the State Mental Institution. We've had lawsuits in Lander. And then we say, oh, gosh, we really need to do something. Is that the way we want to be directed, through lawsuits?
That we can save an awful lot of money if you can identify that child who has much bigger problems than just the MIP at the very first time you see that child.
I bring this out because of the fact of we're in this big, gigantic race to get something accomplished before we've identified the problem.
I've only been in the legislature for 3 years. We've had more discussions about juvenile justice. We're not rushing. You know, my kids are going to have kids by the time this problem is solved, and I'm going to be who knows where.
We're making better criminals out of our juveniles when we put them in facilities that are not appropriate. And then we are paying the bill as citizens of the state of Wyoming by sending them to Rawlins at $30,000 to $40,000 per person.
We're looking at brand new facilities, brand new philosophy, brand new everything. And I'll tell you what, to let one part of the state that has 37% recidivism rate drive this is unconscionable.
To sum it up, I too am frustrated. But we need to answer some of the core questions to get over that frustration and decide what we want to do and how we want to proceed and do that. If we want to become an OJGDP compliant state, then we can do that. That's fairly simple. Somebody just pays the bill, figures out what to do with the kids, writes the standards, and away we go. If we don't, then let's work at what those other pieces of the pie are, and let's have everybody at the table.
This is a first baby step, and we may not see any legislation this session.
I live right across the street from the high school, and this is actually where the teachers park on this side. The student parking is on the other side of the building. Right. But when I first moved here, they didn't have open campus, and so the kids would come over here and they'd sit on the edge of my driveway, as you can see, and they would drink their Pepsis and eat their Cheetos or whatever, and then they'd stuff them in the bushes and come back for the next break. And one of the reasons I've always kept these bushes so cut back is because the kids would put their drinks in the bushes and then go back to fourth period and then come back over and have a cigarette and another drink, and then they'd go back for fifth period, then they'd come back. But now they have open campus, and the kids get to leave campus, so they smoke somewhere else.
Hey Mark, it's Cody. I just thought I'd let you know that I'm in Laramie right now. I'm at the Chuck Wagon restaurant. We were walking and I pulled out, he gave me his toucan. I put some dip in, and the principal's office was right behind us, and he had a big old window, and all of a sudden you just hear him yell and told us to stop, and he came out 2 seconds later and took the toucan, took us into his office, and had the cops called. They searched me, and they gave me a ticket for minor possession of tobacco, and I received 6 months of probation. I really don't blame anybody for my minor possession of chewing tobacco, but myself, because I did it. But I think they were a little harsh on the punishment. When they gave me 6 months and 40 hours of community service. It was for a first-time offense, I think it's just a little bit harsh.
What I see often happen is when they get involved in the system, they feel like the world's out to get them. And in the teenager's mind, a lot of times that turns into rebellion, and we see them acting out more and more because of the way they feel the system is treating them.
Then about a month after the MIP, I got expelled from school for assault and battery.
It just ends up in a vicious cycle and a downward spiral, and the behaviors get worse and worse.
They just expelled me from school, gave me a ticket, probation, 80 hours of community service, restitution, hospital bills, and it's up my life.
At some point, our society says no more, and we pull them out. And we're trying to stop that cycle a lot sooner and show the kids that the world really isn't out to get them.
I blew itching powder on a girl one day in the school. And the principal then, who was named after this school here, Glenn Livingston School, wonderful guy, he got us all out on a hot spring day, so we're going to play shirts and skins and play a little basketball today. I said, great, that'll be fun. We worked up a sweat. He came over with the itching powder, put it on my back and rubbed it in. He said, how does that feel?
Actually, Big Nose George was guilty of committing this very heinous crime of ambushing these two law enforcement officers in ambush on Rattlesnake Canyon up on Elk Mountain. And he was returned to stand trial in Rawlins. They then overran the jail, forced the sheriff to turn the prisoner over to them, and they hauled Big Nose George out to a telegraph pole in front of the Carbon County Courthouse and hanged him from a telegraph pole.
My friend Jose, he was accused of or charged with receiving stolen property and breaking in and entering. He served 11 months for it as a juvenile, but in a county jail with adults.
I had cellmates. My cellmates were I had an 18-year-old, I had like a 24-year-old, an 80-year-old. I had one in there. I was doing okay in school. I wasn't like an A student or anything like that, but I was doing okay to where I was passing my classes.
Enough to graduate.
Enough to graduate. But I got locked up, and guess what? Everything went down. I had nothing but a stop sign. Like I blew a stop sign.
Ticket.
Yeah, a ticket. That's it on my record before I went in there. I was 17. Then I was put in jail for 10 months, and I wasn't even a juvie. It was just a regular jail with adults and everything.
County jail.
It was a county jail, Carbon County Jail. I got involved in like buying stereo equipment and trading it to people. Well, I ran into some stolen stuff. I don't know, somehow the police found out I had it, so they went and searched my house and everything, and they took a lot of stuff that wasn't even stolen and tried building a case like to have me as a burglar and, you know, destroying property and a lot of stuff. You know, they have videos from when I was 12 years old, and they still took it and said I stole them within the past 3-4 months. It was an impound lot. The stuff was missing from an impound lot. And so I don't know, I had it, but I went into the interrogation room, and that's what he says. You know, you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent, but I still want to talk to you. So he starts asking me all these questions of how I got him. I answer every single one of them, and he thought I was lying, so he just took me in, like handcuffed me and everything, and took my wallet and my car keys to my mom, and I didn't get to say goodbye to my mom or anything. Of course, she started crying. They wouldn't let me out. They put my bond was $10,000, which I didn't have $10,000. They gave you 180 days for a speedy trial. I did see my mom through a glass. It was like that thick. It was a glass. That's pretty much it. Talk over a phone. I didn't get to like hug her. I didn't get to give her a kiss. Nothing. The beginning of August 4th, I went in, and they didn't transport me anywhere. They just left me there. I turned 18 in there on November. They were trying to get me for a burglary and different felonies and
Receiving stolen property.
Yeah, at the end, they just they told me, well, if you want to get out, you need to like say you did something so it's faster, or else they're gonna build a case, take you to trial, and take you to prison. What finally got me out was my attorney said, well, you gotta say you're guilty to something, so they let you out faster. And if not, they're gonna take you to trial, try and get you in longer. What I said, well, what do I admit to? I mean, I didn't do it. And what we came up with is, she told me pretty much to say I was guilty to receiving stolen property, which was still a felony. They didn't want to make it a misdemeanor. When I was in court, they supposedly had fingerprints and shoe prints. When I was in court, I asked them, you know, do any fingerprints match with mine? They said no. And did any of the shoe prints that you guys have match with mine? They said no. And then what are you holding against me? They said, we know you did it because this guy that was at a party drunk said that I was saying that
Hearsay. It's all hearsay.
Yeah, it was all hearsay.
No fact. Just they can't not stand to not figure out a case. They need to
be right. They
need to solve the case, no matter if it's
true or not,
damaging other people's lives that had nothing to do with it.
Yeah. To them, I was already guilty. You know, when I went out to the court, the prosecuting attorney was telling the judge, yeah, he's a menace to society, he's a danger to our community, and this. But I didn't have a record at all. But he was still making it as seemed like I had a
proportion,
like I was some kind of killer, murderer, or something like that. Initially, they wanted me for 11 years. So it was either 11 years or just
3 years probation.
2 weeks ago, we go to the park on Southside. We're walking his dog. You know, we start playing basketball with my little cousins. You know, the usual in the park.
Yeah.
We get tired, sit down next to the benches.
And they have these little posts with chains interlocking them.
Yeah.
And these chains have been broken for months, you know, maybe a year. And so the cops come up, 3 cops come to get me and Jose, and they told us that they had someone reported us breaking the chains just then, and that
They were going to give us tickets or citations for destruction of property, of city property.
We are federales, you know, the mountain police. If you're the police, where are your badges? Badges? We ain't got no badges. We don't need no badges. I don't have to show you any stinking badges.
You can go all the way back even into early Wyoming history in cases where the county sheriffs very frequently in Wyoming and the judges in the various districts in Wyoming felt that they had the primary responsibility for dispensing justice in their communities, and they didn't much like interference on the part of the federal government, but they didn't even like interference on the part of state government.
I think the sheriffs were really going to push back hard with the concept of any agency from the state, I'm not picking on DFS, but any agency of the state, dictating this is how you will run your facility.
I am not a person who is in favor of allowing the sheriffs to make their own standards. And I think that it's just, it makes sense because those standards there are tried and true standards that are already available.
I just seem to think if we include everybody, we're in a far better position for parents and everybody to know what to expect.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Sessions, you're absolutely correct. My position is the more stakeholders you can bring to the table to work these things out and get agreement on, the better off this state is going to be. So what I'm saying is, I think that the legislature needs to take a positive stand and say, yes, we're going to adopt some standards.
I stand before you today representing thousands of kids. I'm going to ask you guys to go back to Judge Hartman's testimony when a kid is unjustly thrown into a jail cell and exposed to criminal minds.
Standards such as you do not house a child that maybe had a minor crime and you just can't seem to find the parent, and you're suddenly housing them with a violent criminal.
As a 12-year-old boy, I did just that. Standing in front of jail cell 3B, I was told, you see this kid? He's a murderer, and you're going into his cell. This is where you belong, and this is where you're going to stay.
The other bill, what that deals with is what's called an assessment, so that when the officer picks up a kid at 2 in the morning for a crime, that he can figure out through an assessment tool, objectively, not subjectively, where should I put this kid?
As I walked into that jail cell, knowing I was there on an unruly charge, blood on his hands and malice in his heart, the kid called me an explicit. You're doing push-ups all night, he said. You're going to do what I say. Well, I said, you're not going to call me that explicit. I know I'm on your turf. I'll do your push-ups, and I will survive. And I did that.
Over and over, the same recommendations are made time and time again. You could take the 1981 report that the Attorney General's office commissioned and put 2009 on it, and it would be just as appropriate.
Byron Odecomen, representing the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police. We would welcome a discussion of having uniformity in terms of our standards, recognizing that our piece of this pile that I sense the frustration with is a very small piece of the pie.
Chairman Gingrey. But I'm just worried if we just say, well, this is just too complicated, there's a lot more to do, and then we don't do anything this year, that we're further behind. You know, I guess I'm sort of leaning toward let's do something.
Chairman Ross, Chairman Gingrey, Wyoming leaders, unify the system. Give these kids the protection they need against the criminal mindset they learn the moment they step into these places. We're going to save lives. We're going to save thousands of futures. Protect these kids. Protect these kids.
Senator Meyer.
Aye.
Senator Perkins. Senator
He's
Sessions.
excused.
Senator Sessions.
Aye.
Senator Ross.
Aye.
You end up locking up more kids who are Hispanic and they get more attention and all of that. it's really a reflection about how the schools are managing those populations, and culturally how Cheyenne as a community is coping with Hispanics culturally.
Since I'm in probation right now, and that stuff with the chains in the park, if I get found guilty for whatever reason, if I don't show enough information, enough evidence that I'm innocent, I get locked up for 5 years.
I think it's absurd. That's why we ought to be doing something to give anybody a second chance. And there's some very aggressive police people now, because the citizenry like to have tough police. They like to have people on the street in their town who don't take any crap off of a teenager, especially a smart-ass teenager, especially one that will lip off at them.
They said if you guys admit to it right now, or if one of you guys admit to it right now, I'll just write that person a ticket, and if none of you guys report, or we'll just write all 3 of you guys a ticket. And we didn't admit to it, and then I just told him, I'll do it so he doesn't get into trouble and go to the pen. And by then he said, no, I already wrote the tickets. You guys are all in the book and everything. You guys are all getting tickets and got to go to court December 7th.
I'm trying to get some evidence, trying to get a letter from the city.
It's been broken.
So they know, because I'm pretty sure the city knows
that it's been broken.
It's been broken for a while, but they're still trying to get me for it. If I can't prove it, I'm going for 5 years.
Better not come any closer. No sea tonto, hombre. We didn't try to do you any harm. Why don't you try to be a little more polite?
The detective of the case, he thinks I'm a bad person based on pretty much nothing, because there was nothing on my record that, had me as a criminal. The only thing that there was, a violation of a stop sign. And, he's just making assumptions, I guess, like, this guy looks like a bad guy. He's Mexican. Let's bring him in.
My sister's boyfriend, he's the perfect example. He's perfect.
Why?
He's Mexican. And he has a target on his back. They'll chase him down everywhere he goes.
Why?
Because he's Mexican. Why what? He's been in trouble, but he's Mexican, so.
People are gonna say to me, this isn't true.
And he has tattoos everywhere.
This isn't true, this isn't happening, is it?
Oh yeah, it's happening. You better believe it's happening.
My probation, I can't leave the state. I can't drive. I have to have a job, which right now I don't. And, but I gotta be in school, which I'm doing. I just got out like an hour ago. I was here since I was a little kid, so. Okay. I can't break law no matter what, Even my probation officer said even a seatbelt ticket might risk my freedom. Not that I'm a convicted felon, might prevent me from actually being a U.S. citizen. And this is our crime scene.
The crime scene right here.
What is this?
This is the crime scene.
This is my mom. Her name is Lucy. She's gonna go to court with me. So are my aunts. Her name's Blanca and Anayeli. And he is my best friend. He's like my brother, pretty much my brother, like my white brother. But yeah, he's also involved in the charges, so he still has to go. So right now it's 12:51. So in a half hour, I gotta head up to the courtroom, plead not guilty, hope to get out of there, just like I went in, and not with shackles and handcuffs.
Buena suerte. Good luck. Lo necesito.
It's like a 50-50. Yeah, it's like 50-50 chance. It all depends on the judge, I'm under the charges of property destruction, which involves a chain being broken, and at the park. I don't know if you can see that. It says dismissed by the judge. They dismissed the charges, and I'm heading home. I think we've been through it, and like I said, I wasn't worried because we had enough evidence that we weren't even guilty or anything.
Pretty sure they knew that we didn't do nothing.
Yeah,
that's why they dismissed the charges.
They're probably even gonna get pissed off because they can get me on that and try and pin other things on me.
Even when you've done your time, it's hard to stay out of trouble. You go up again and again until you grow up and know how to get by. By that time, the fellows know you're a tough one. They admire you.
I believe that anyone that went through that incarceration system that wasn't really a criminal was profoundly affected by it.
What's at stake for the hero? His life, his sanity, schooling, friends, society.
They shackled me up because I smoked a cigarette and didn't have guardians to watch me, so I was a criminal. When I got to Casper, you know, they'd drive you into the basement.
I don't know how to explain it. It makes you feel dead. I think as a juvenile going to jail, you experience death.
Well, we do have a facility that's inadequate.
Unfortunately, kids are still being held in that facility. You know, it's led to some sexual abuse occurring in that facility. It's just not a good situation.
This is Casper, where I spent 1 year and 4 months in jail, just waiting to go to another center or institution.
Well, the current facility that we have now lacks a sprinkler system. Dr. Rausch has pointed out that it does have some hanging hazards.
They unshackled me. Well, they didn't unshackle me. They put me up in the elevator and then unshackled me when I got to the top floor and in-processed me.
And it also lacks outdoor recreation, fresh air, and limited ability to exercise.
Kids are being held in an old jail that was determined unfit for adults over 10 years ago.
The ACLU sued Natrona County in the early 90s.
I can still remember my first time going to JDC, the Juvenile Detention Center. As soon as the door closed, I remember I just started crying, and I felt like my whole body went numb, and I was screaming and begging and asking for somebody to give me an explanation for why I was there.
And the kinds of conditions that you've described in Wyoming in this particular facility sound horrendous. And I am sad to say Wyoming's not unique in that, and that we as a country need to be taking a good, long, hard look at where we put our kids.
My first night there, when I was 13, I first went there. First night he brought around all the kids that were on transition, and outside of our cell, outside of the glass, he'd be like, you know, choose your bitch, you know, which really, you know, scared me. 13, first time in jail, and he'd always say things like, you know, I'll take you into the water closet and rape you, and he was my least favorite of them all. Yeah. At JDC, I got stabbed twice, once in the head and once in the chest.
I can remember one of the counselors telling me that I looked like the exorcist going in there. I just lost all control. It was the scariest thing to be placed somewhere that I've never been, because you're never in jail until you go to jail. And
the one in the head, a kid had grabbed a Lysol sanitizing spray bottle and crushed it up and made like a little shank out of it, and he stabbed me in the head.
I was just left there to cry, and there was nothing I can do. I was so lost. My body was empty.
Second time I got stabbed, I was in my cell. Another kid. It was with a comb, like, I don't know. It was one of those little plastic combs you get, you know, 25 cents or whatever. Just sharpened that, and he stabbed me in the chest, and I have a scar there now.
And I would say to anybody who's willing to lock up a child in a facility with no windows and with no room to exercise and with no education, I would ask that person, would you put your child there? And if you wouldn't put your child there, don't put your neighbor's child there, because your neighbor's child is coming back into your neighborhood, and they will bear the mark of that treatment.
The kid was from Casper, and he said he was a blood or Crip or gangster of some kind, and I was like telling him, you know, you're not a gangster, you know why you gotta be like that, and he got really mad and stabbed me in the head a couple nights later.
His little brother got a first-time offense, joyriding, and got sentenced to a year in jail, and ended up spending most of that in county jail, in adult jail, because he turned 18. They tried him as an adult when he was a minor.
while ago in middle school, a buddy of mine, his mother had a Jag, and we took it out at about 3 in the morning and went through the McDonald's drive-thru. He was driving, of course.
And the crime is of major proportions. May he be transferred to the adult court.
And we both got pulled over, and we spent the night answering a lot of questions, basically.
You got to get your Jesus shoes off and get down in the muck. And when you get your Jesus shoes off and deal with them as a fellow human being in extremity, you're going to make some progress.
I went out with a friend one night, and you know, it was a crazy night. Went down to Fort Collins with the Club Suite, and on the way back, we met up with with these kids from St. Louis. Supposedly, I guess they're Bloods, and they liked us a lot. And I guess you get 5-point star tattoos if you're a Blood. And so the one kid gave me this tattoo, supposedly in the back seat of this car, on the way back to Cheyenne. So, and I had no idea about that. I woke up the next morning with it.
His mom had really wanted him to be part of the Special Friends program, and so there we were matched. We were matched to be like the big brother sort of thing, and that's how I got to know Dustin and his mom. And his mom always was great about involving Dustin in good programs, to the YMCA and various other things.
I was 12 years old, and I was living with my mom, and she actually passed away before I turned 13. And I went to go live with my dad.
And he moved back in with his dad, and then his dad got in trouble again.
And my dad, made and distributed meth through all Cheyenne and other towns, and he got caught, and I had nowhere to go.
We were able to be with Dustin when his mom died, and involved in helping him, plan the funeral with his couple of his aunts came out.
I actually wasn't there whenever they made the meth, but you see how to make the pipes, how to sell it, how to weigh it. What to do to get it.
But that was difficult when his mom got sick and died, and that was obviously a very traumatic time for him.
But before my mom had passed away, she made sure that me and Brendan had a strong bond, and so when she did pass away and my dad got sent back to prison, I had nowhere to go, and since me and Brendan had a strong bond, he took me in, which was great,
My name's Brendan McKinney, and this is my wife, Glenda, and we have been foster parents for, I don't know how many, with three young men over the past number of years.
Well, when I went to New Beginnings, I went because my old pal, Senator Pete Domenici, told me his son had this remarkable experiment out there, and so he said, if you're ever in town, maybe you could drop by.
Welcome to D.C., Senator Simpson.
He said, if you're ever in town, maybe you could drop by. And I got in the rental car, went out there. They gave me the whole tour, and I spoke to 2 classes.
Me, I'm a caretaker. I take care of situations for my family. My mother, she might have to work a double. I look out for my sister, look out for my family. I'm just a backbone.
What's your alias?
Big Ham. Big Ham.
Big Ham, a.k.a. Big Ham.
A.k.a. Chew.
Like pork, like ham?
Did you call me some swine, brother?
No, I didn't know. I'm just trying to...
What's yours? Do you have an a.k.a.?
E-Money! E-Money!
E-Money? Like,
E-Money!
Oh, okay.
All right.
Say now, I'll tell you my age while I'm here.
I thought it was terrific, but it was heavily secured. I couldn't believe it. There were outer doors and inner doors, and I said, well, what have these guys done? This is quite a facility. Well, they've been sentenced to 3 years or 5.
My age is 17, and I'm here for attempting to do a serious offense against someone.
Why hasn't Wyoming found like the political will to change this juvenile justice system?
I feel sometimes like all I do is nag over juvenile justice. But finally we've, thanks to the governor, appointing Judge Hartman and Senator Tony Ross, who supported me in my Judiciary Committee as my chairman.
The governor has been very supportive of juvenile justice issues, and he's been very responsive to some of the recommendations that the council has made, and I believe that overall in the last few years there has been a great deal of progress because of that partnership.
Good afternoon. The order of business today will be that we will do the two juvenile justice standards bills.
They're not monumental bills, but what they stand for is that finally the Wyoming leadership is standing up, or Wyoming legislature is standing up and saying, this is an important issue, and we're showing our leadership.
Would the committee chairman like to come up and address this, and Judge Hartman, since you were intimately involved in it?
And now we're starting to work on standards for how we treat our juveniles throughout the state and to try to treat them uniformly and equally. And this is a good step towards that. I just applaud the committee. It's been my great honor to serve as co-chairman of that committee for the past several years, and I'm just excited that we're moving some things forward now.
Well, it certainly has been my pleasure to take on the issue of juvenile justice in Wyoming. It's been something that I've wanted to do for a long time. Certainly our governor has given me that great opportunity to be able to work in this particular area. I think these two bills are an important step. We have a long way to go. But I think it's significant that people are starting to talk about juvenile issues in Wyoming and starting to address them. I'm glad that I got to play a small part. Thank you.
Given that they've addressed both of them, I'll sign both of them.
I think our legislature has learned that we don't do a lot of things right in this state, and that they're willing to look at those things that we can change to save a whole lot of our kids.
I think it's very exciting that the Wyoming leaders are taking progressive steps towards preventing the experiences that have happened to me to other kids in the juvenile justice system.
That hard-headed Wyoming attitude. Here's what I like about Wyoming. When people in Wyoming are hard to change, you have a hard time getting them to do certain things.
We still have a lot of work to do on the back end. Why are those kids in there for probation revocations? Are there other viable alternatives in the communities? And if so, how do we get communities to start utilizing those facilities instead of detention?
With Wyoming people, when they do make a change, when they do end up believing in something, they kind of stick by it. They don't change every other day.
We went back down to the offices where the classrooms are and stuff, and I sat down to talk to the director, and I said, okay, tell me a little bit more about what you'd like me to do, what you'd like these teachers to learn. And he explained a little bit more, and then I just got up and said, I have to go. Because I just got up and ran out. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't take being locked up with really low ceilings, and just that feeling of, closure. I mean, I know that's what prisons are like, but these are kids. These are kids.
What's at stake for the hero? His life, his sanity, schooling, friends, society.
This is Casper, where I spent 1 year and 4 months in jail just waiting. I smoked a cigarette. I didn't have guardians to watch me, so I was a criminal. And I spent about 4 months there before they had a bed open for me at Normative Services. And from there, they shackled me up again, and they transported me from Casper. Normative Services is right outside of Sheridan.
The director of the Wardell Academy called me and asked me to do some in-services over there for their teachers. So I took a trip out there. I went and visited, and it was quite a place.
They asked you what was wrong. Oh, I'm kind of depressed because I'm locked up away from my family. Oh, well, you need Zoloft and Seroquel and lithium and Trazodone because you're not going to sleep, and it was really crooked.
I support behavior management systems that reward positive behavior on the part of children involved in the juvenile justice system.
While I was at Normative Services, they had 4 levels: negative, neutral, plus, and positive.
One of the first things I noticed were the white lines on the floor.
And then they had 2 extra negative levels, like 1-to-1 and eyesight.
And I had to stay on the outside of the white line, and the kids were not allowed to cross the white line into my area.
Eyesight is where you had to be within eyesight of a staff member.
On the bunk bed, the mattress was really thin, and I said, wow, is that all they get to sleep on?
And 1-to-1 is where you had to be within an arm's length.
And he said, well, this guy's at level 1.
And when you're on negative, you can't talk to anybody. Nobody can talk to you.
He explained that as the students behaved better or had more appropriate behavior for their whatever they were working on, they got thicker mattresses. And if it didn't work so well and they took a step back, then they went back to the smaller mattresses.
What? I mean, if you're gonna give me a thin mattress, make me keep this thin mattress until I leave, because I don't want to never remember, every time I think about the thin mattress, I'm gonna want to be like, man, I don't want to never go back there,
The only mattresses I ever saw were really thin ones like this. But he assured me that they could earn their way up to a thicker mattress.
I think it is perverse, inhumane, and probably illegal to have such behavior management systems reduced to the level of basic material need. And so the use of sort of differential mattresses or diets of different levels of calories or different access to educational programming as a reward system, I think is inappropriate and probably illegal.
Hey, help!
They sent up a transportation guy from Casper to Sheridan. From Buffalo to Worland, it's about 4 hours. From Worland to Thermopolis, and Thermopolis to Shoshone, Shoshone to Casper, which is another 4 hours about. And when I got to Casper, they unshackled me, booked me in. I was shackled by the hands to a chain around my belt. I couldn't move it any more than that. And I spent 12 months in Casper awaiting a bed in Worland. When I was at JDC, I was locked down in my cell, and one night, you knew what was happening. You could hear the screaming, all that stuff. When I went in the next day to the day room and stuff, we talked amongst ourselves, and this kid had been raped in there. And nothing, I know the guards heard it because I heard it, and they sit right outside the cells in the hallway. It's a filthy place up there, and they got the old bars and stuff, and the paint chips are all falling off the walls. It's a nasty place. I think we should go see if we can film in the JDC place. I think everyone should see what I had to go through for a year and a half.
Right now we're on the 3rd floor at the Juvenile Detention Center. I was incarcerated here for most of my teenage years, on and off, but the longest I was here was about 3 months at a time, 6 months at a time.
We called and tried to figure out something for you, but with the population we got right now, there's no way to go in.
How many kids are in there right now?
25.
25? And what are they in there for?
Well, various, everywhere from possession to grand theft auto.
Okay.
So,
what about, like, a councilman recently said, show me one kid who doesn't belong there, and we'll get them out. Are there kids that
Well,
don't believe
no, that doesn't happen anymore. We have a detention assessment tool that every kid that comes in goes through it. It's on a point matrix, and if they don't meet a certain criteria, they're released back to the parent or to the youth crisis center.
I definitely believe that the majority of the kids that are in JDC right now should not be there, and I'm positive there are some that should be there, you know, serving sentences. But for the majority of the reasons that kids go to places like JDC are heinous.
Yeah, you got to remember, this facility is a pre and post adjudication. We're holding kids waiting for court, or we're holding kids that have been sentenced waiting for their placement.
Well, you could look at my file, you know, I was there, you know, and that's why I was there. You know, I didn't steal anything, I didn't hurt anybody, I wasn't selling drugs, I wasn't, you know, stealing cars or anything like that.
I got pissed off when I couldn't see my family.
Okay.
That's you know, that's the only thing I had, my family. You know, so I'm not far. But it's right now, as you can see, a bus is like right there. You know, so I'm not far.
So me and Jose were walking home.
Me and Cody were just walking from a friend's house.
We saw some guys come out of the trailer.
This one guy just, you know, starts some trouble.
And we're walking. They started, you know, talking, you know, trying to get us riled up to fight with them.
Him and Cody get into it.
They came up on us, so it just started like happening right then.
The guy ran back into his trailer house, and when he came out, he brought 2 kitchen knives.
A little bit of scrapping.
Before the cops got there,
we heard the cops pull up, so we ran a couple blocks.
I guess we weren't fast enough.
The cops like stopped us and arrested us for what just happened for the fight.
I don't know, it was either, I knew something was gonna happen. I was either gonna get locked up or get sent over here.
Jose had the choice of pleading guilty, going to the pen for 5 years, pleading not guilty and getting deported for 20 years. And yeah.
So I just decided to run. Just went for it. You know, I almost got away, but the cop pulled out a taser, you know, hit me in the back. I didn't fall, I kept running though.
He chose, you know, not to get not to go to the prison. He chose to get deported.
An hour later, they found me under a truck. Cause you know, what I did was I kept running and I slid under a truck. So you know, I thought I was gonna be safe there. But there was an officer that was driving by, and he was able to see my foot. You know, he told me to just get out. You know, he already had me, so I just did. And I was booked into the Carver County Jail in Rawlins, Wyoming. And you know, at least I'm free right now. I'm not locked up or anything. I'm gonna show you around right now. You know, show you a few places down here in Juarez, and I don't know. Hope you like it. All right, so now that I'm in Mexico, I gotta do some different plans that I got in my mind. First, I gotta finish high school. You know, start a good job. They need someone speaking English down here. You know, so I'll try and figure something out. I'm kicking it with my family right now, so I hope that's going pretty good. You know, I finally got to see them. You know, it's been about 10 years since I've been here. It's kind of different. It's a big change for me right now. But I guess all I got to do is keep moving forward. You know, keep my head up, and just see what else is up the road. Also, I want to give a shout out to Cody. You know, Cody just got out of Wyoming. You know, it's crazy down there. Before something else happens, you know, you never know. You might get caught up in something else, or you know, the cops will just find another excuse.
Once again, they shackled me up and they drove me back up to Buffalo and then west to Worland, where I spent 6 months at the boys' school. I was so drugged up at the boys' school. There was a female doctor that went there, and every time I went and saw her, she would put me on more pills, lithium, Zoloft, and stuff like that, and higher doses. So when I was at the boys' school, a lot of the staff were very verbally abusive, and not quite physically abusive, but they would, you know, make it seem like they were going to be physically abusive. And I mean, there were some of them there, you know, that were there because, you know, they needed a job, basically is what it seemed like, and they weren't abusive, but they didn't help at all. They'd call for meds in the morning where the nurse would come in, you'd all line up, And there might have been 3 people in that whole building that didn't line up in the morning to get their medication. Most of us were on Seroquel. I was on lithium, Seroquel, Zoloft, and Trazodone. And at Worland, I spent 6 months there before I was released and went home. I consider it a gladiator school. Everyone there wants to fight, you know, everyone there wants to make everyone else their bitch, or, you know, everyone just wants to be an asshole. And to move from that situation where, you know, I did have a good parent at home, even though he wasn't there all the time, to that situation was really frustrating.
Well, one time during the 4th of July, we have 3 fireworks stores in Evanston, Wyoming, and me and my buddies got together and made a homemade rocket launcher. Well, we took some illegal fireworks and shot them out. Well, when it got to be my turn, I got chicken and threw it and shot it at 50 other people and killed an old lady's chihuahua. Did you get caught? Yes, I did. And it was quite fun because the cops were laughing so hard they didn't arrest me, so got away with it that time.
We can't hand out a cookie cutter and say, every county, you're going to do it this way. Instead, we give ideas, and particularly, and this is something Senator Burns and I brought back from our national meeting, was Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative, JDAI. And we're really pushing that should be the model that counties start adopting.
In August, they released a report showing dramatic results, reducing recidivism, increasing the cost effectiveness of programs by keeping kids in community-based alternatives to detention and keeping kids out of detention in the first place.
And it's a model that was created by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, which has been adopted throughout the nation in other states. And this year, Judge Hartman has arranged for some pilot projects in particular counties, and I think that's really going to be where we find a real difference.
So it's actually a very innovative approach where you have the private foundation, private dollars, government, and local communities working together on behalf of their kids and communities.
Jail certainly is needed in certain circumstances, but you really want to reserve hardware-secure facility detention for serious violent crime.
Many times, the best thing you can do is put them in secure care. They really need to be in secure care for their safety and for our safety. But there's a whole bunch of circumstances under which the kinds of money we're spending to lock kids up could be used better, holding them accountable and rehabilitating them back in the community.
3 board rentals, 5 lift tickets, and 1 boot rental, please.
The cost of putting them in jail is quite a bit more than a day out skiing a month. Plus, it helps them do something positive with their lives instead of just sitting around in a cell or wherever they may be, you know, a house or wherever they may be placed. This just helps them get out and enjoy the outdoors of Wyoming, and helps them grow, you know, their hobbies and things they like to do.
Well, I got caught with possession of marijuana, and that's why that was like about maybe like a year and a half ago. So I've been through this whole issues with probation and stuff like that. This is the hell of a better choice than any of that, you know, like, because here you actually get to, like, you do what you want, you know, you don't really need anything, like any drugs or something, like, because you're occupied skiing, for heaven's sake.
In Laramie, you know, these kids live in an amazing playground for recreation, and half of them don't know it, and so we try and expose them to that. We've hung on to our core philosophy that is kids need support from caring adults, and role modeling is a real key, we think, to reaching out to these kids. We also recognize that teens are into risk-taking and adrenaline and that kind of thing, and we try to teach them that you don't have to break the law to get that powerful rush of adrenaline.
PY, the Progressive Youth. I think it's really nice because I actually got a little ankle thing around my ankle.
You don't have to get into drugs or drinking or those kind of things. We found all these businesses out there that are willing to take these kids in, and we make it youth-centered. So the kid that's real interested in automotive stuff, he can do his community service hours around that shop.
And like doing yoga, it gets your body all healthy and stuff. So I think it's great what they're doing.
When you get into the system-involved kids, that's where we've had amazing changes. But with It used to be that a kid on probation had a 60 to 80% chance of being revoked and ending up in jail. We've dropped that for kids in our program down to anywhere from 12 to 20% that will reoffend or end up going back to jail.
I wish the state would put more money into that instead of just actually trying to punish the kids, because that's not really doing anything. We should have figured that one out a long time ago, you know.
You know, we had such good luck with kids that were in state care and state probation and intensive supervised probation, but we started looking at what can we do before they get to that point.
I definitely stole candy from a grocery store.
Ouch, man. Why aren't you still in jail?
Because they didn't catch me.
First-time offenders that really aren't in that population of criminal thinkers or habitual behaviors and really just made a mistake.
Well, the only thing I can remember is stealing bubble gum.
Those are the ones that we really think that they get into the system and they start to think the world's out to get them. We can approach them and say, you know what, you're a normal kid, you just made a mistake and got caught.
That was ridiculous. It was kid stuff, but I guess they won't. I haven't learned my lesson yet, so that's why I'm here right now.
Sentencing a young kid to yoga sounds great to me. It sounds like the kind of creative and innovative approach to working with young people. Yoga is the kind of exercise and positive interaction that young people can do to become self-aware and develop assets and strengths.
We hold them accountable for what they did, but we also show them that they have potential.
No, life lessons, really. I guess. Like if, to be able to listen to other people's commands, I guess you could say. And that's a really tough lesson to get around, but I guess it's what you gotta do.
It turns out that it's working, and that program's even better because we have, I think the last number I saw is only 7% of the kids that are finishing that program are ending up actually in probation and state care and going to court. So.
Tell you the truth, this is a really nice place, you know. It's got some good, kind people in it, you know, and, you know, you could talk to them about things, and, you know, it's really quite nice here, actually. I actually started doing activity. I started playing basketball all over again, you know. I started sweating for the first time, really. But, yeah, it's quite nice here, you know. It's quite nice. It's nice to get away from, like, everything, you know what I mean?
And that's the essence of diversion. And again, it's different than a lot of traditional diversion programs where it's compliance-based and urine tests and curfews and that kind of thing. And instead, we're taking the mentoring approach to these kids.
Before the 48 great social welfare agencies represented at Atlantic City is laid the broadest project ever attempted in social work. The coordination of all existing national and local welfare agencies, schools, YMCAs, boys clubs, Boy Scouts, working together to the end that children in danger of becoming delinquent, in need of guidance and correction, may have continuous supervision. Already in 17 states and 100 cities, social agencies have adopted the continuous supervision through coordination idea.
We care for only the most dangerous kids, the kids that would do more harm to themselves and to the community. And the other kids, we try to move them back into the community as quickly as possible.
Vinny, you too, Vinny.
You too, Vinny. Vinny, he looks like a priest. Father Vinny.
Father Vinny.
So the old facility was essentially geared towards teaching young delinquents how to become old criminals. It was essentially a school for crime. And the kids knew it.
I was put in the Oak Hill first time, 2007.
This is where their recreation yard was right there, that enclosed area. They didn't have recreation with the rest of the population.
I mean, the rooms were so hot that if they had asthma or were on psychotropic drugs, they could literally die.
Right.
There's no sprinkler system. Rats and cockroaches crawled on the kids at night, so they had to stuff their clothes around the toilets. It was just a nightmare.
When I was in a situation where it was gates on windows and stuff, a lot of times I'd be angry. I wouldn't even know what I'm angry for. I wouldn't even know what I'm angry at.
And the program, I think, matched the physical plant nightmare. I think people were doing things that peaked at uninteresting and phlegmatic and bottomed out at abusive and neglectful.
These were the 2 suicide rooms right here.
So, the system has to sort of move itself away from over-reliance on large, locked, secure confinement to more reliance on small, locally based, community-based, non-secure and secure confinement. That takes a little time.
Because at one time, remember, we talking maybe 260 residents at one time.
How many are there now at the new facility?
Oh, 60. 60.
A little less than 60.
Right.
You restrain them, you lock them down, you handcuff them, you pepper spray them, and then 9 months later you release them and say, go forth and sin no more? Well, you're not going to have 4 guards walking around with them when they get out into the community.
These old rooms were more to punish the kids rather than rehabilitate them. They weren't model citizens when they left. We think what our reform effort is doing is helping these kids become better citizens and more productive people when they leave here. A lot of our kids go to college after they leave here, which was unheard of back before the reform effort began.
We came from Oak Hill over here around about March. The experience was like, my eyes was like, wow. I was looking everywhere like, man, what is this place? I ain't never seen nothing like it.
Going into New Beginnings Youth Development Center, which was named by a current employee who works there now.
They engage your family 100% along the way.
What you see here is the value system that we honor here at the Myers School, and this wall demonstrates all the behaviors that the scholars have been engaged in.
You get family team meetings on certain levels. You get time to see your family a lot, visitation.
You could still run a really lousy program in this beautiful building. Right. So let's not fool ourselves into thinking the building defines everything.
I'm taking some college courses right now, beneficial activities here that I've been doing, football. I play basketball in the gym. I'm not on a team, but I play. School work. They have a lot of hands-on vocational trades you can take, as far as woodworking, welding. I work on step by step. I have taken a little metalworking. I enjoy making flowers with the metal.
The kids hate the cops, and many of the cops hate the kids, and that's not a good thing. I mean, we want our young people to be productive members of society, and you know what? Most productive members of society don't hate the cops. They see the cops as people that help keep them from being crime victims, right? We work with the police department. They gave us guns that were seized in crimes, right, or were bought in those buyback programs. Right. They destroyed the guns so they were inoperable. They gave them to us so the young people could turn them into artwork in what we call our Guns to Roses program. And we built a whole program around it. The police came and talked to the young people about gun violence. We brought in several victims groups where the victims had been either personally victimized or had loved ones who were victimized, generally killed with guns. And the young people essentially symbolically turned these weapons that harm people into something that's beautiful. This building is designed to promote engagement between staff and young people and to keep young people from acting out by programming them, by helping them turn their lives around, not by physically restraining them.
Yes, this environment did teach me a handsome amount of self-respect.
There are a lot of good examples of positive approaches that are working to reduce recidivism rates of young people in the justice system. One approach is the Missouri model.
It's as one blue ribbon commissioner in Washington, D.C. said once they came to Missouri and looked at the program, it's like an artichoke, layers and layers and layers of things to make the program work, but in the middle of it, there's a big heart. And you have to have a big heart in these programs to care about these kids.
Now, we're not saying that the Missouri approach is going to work everywhere. What we are saying, though, is that that approach can be tailored to each state depending on what that state's needs are.
We borrowed liberally from what they did in Missouri, but we also put our own approach on that, and we call it the DC model.
I have a hobby for woodworking. So when I get out, I'll probably try to look for, go into an apprenticeship get a car, house, job, live well for myself.
The recidivism rate for kids coming out of Oak Hill has declined by 47% since we initiated the Missouri model at Oak Hill and now New Beginnings.
Were you the guy asking all the questions about juvenile justice? Yeah. My firm is the architectural firm that's designing the new one in Natrona County. Are you?
And the gymnasium is here, and the outdoor courtyard is here.
The plan that we really have at this point in time is to try and look at regional detention facilities.
We're applying for $8 million of stimulus money, and the governor does have, I think, roughly $15 million of discretionary funds that he can spend. We're applying for 8 of it.
One of the concerns I have about any facility is that it will be filled, and the cost of keeping kids in a facility is very high.
This is the proposed new facility that we're attempting to build. Sprinkler system, outdoor recreation, fresh air and exercise.
I don't know what your daily costs are in Wyoming, but this is an average, about $200 a day to keep a kid in detention.
Recently I was in court and the estimate given was $300 a day to maintain a child in a particular facility.
But you can run a very effective alternative program for $35 a day or less, in fact, much less. So there's a huge cost savings.
Well, the number of beds is still being negotiated. This facility is 32 to 38 beds.
I think the governor has his own mind made up about how large that's going to be.
One would say we have a huge need in Wyoming to have juvenile detention facilities because we detain so many kids.
If the governor were to just want a 24-bed facility, then it would be a 20 to 24-bed facility.
It's impossible to answer the question of how large the facility should be until the underlying question of why we are detaining so many kids is answered.
My belief is this: it's a field of dreams strategy, which is if you build it, they will come. So if you build these facilities in communities, these facilities will get filled with children. So and it's not based on whether or not those kids should be incarcerated and are a risk to public safety.
I do think that we need to be careful about how many beds we build, because if you spend all of your juvenile service dollars maintaining and staffing those beds, then that becomes your main intervention.
This would be co-located with the next to the adult facility. Although it would be sight and sound separate, it would have a sally port, or a corridor here that would be connected to the adult facility.
I think the last thing we need is for anyone to build any more juvenile jails. But as long as it's, better conditions for those that deserve to go there, that's fine. But, connecting one to an adult jail, I don't think that's a good idea.
There would be a fence around the entire facility.
Okay.
I mean, it is a secure facility.
We do want facilities for kids just in case if they do get in trouble, but we don't want more and more and more places for kids to go.
My hope is to advance our community, to build our community, and not to warehouse kids, and to do what is appropriate for our kids. That's my hope.
Okay.
Less incarceration, assign more community service.
What you guys are doing is critically important. Don't let me be negative as to what you're doing. You need to have care and compassion.
Incarcerating juveniles for curfew offenses is ridiculous.
I would have to say to a judge, you're going to sentence somebody to a certain amount of time being locked up for skateboarding, smoking a cigarette. You did wrong.
I would tell that judge that a kid shouldn't be incarcerated unless he's a danger to himself or the community.
But that's a pretty small percentage of the number of kids that we deal with in the system.
Times have changed, and the time to change is now.
I think we can all agree that desired outcomes are not necessarily tied to the level of dollars spent. According to DFS, we currently spend $68 million a year on juvenile justice, and that's outside of the hundreds of thousands or probably millions of dollars that get spent locally on this issue.
I think Wyoming really needs to get a juvenile justice system down and
start helping people that really need it.
I have in the studio with me again, I have Dustin and the rest of Goon Squad.
Was able to finally enroll in college, you know, because of the way my life is going right now, you know, so I'm going to be doing that, you know, and, you know, I can finally, you know, afford things and stuff, you know, it's cool. Right now, I've just been working on some music stuff. This group I'm working with called Goon Squad is actually working on trying to go on tour.
All my gifts was from me, so you better believe that I never believed that I could ever achieve. I'm me chasing my dream and stacking up the cream. It seemed like a fantasy. 10 years later, I turn it to reality.
Now I am just gonna go to El Trip, the community college here in town, and right now I don't know what I'm gonna study. You know, just general studies right now. You know.
But I never listen, cause I ain't meant to wash dishes. I went down my own path, now money I just stacked. I came from selling, I'm going for the plaques. I know my mama will be oh so proud. She in heaven just smiling.
Worst thing I ever did as a juvenile, a friend of mine had a GTO, we'd take it down a dirt road going 100 miles per hour on our lunch break. So you guys are reenacting that, and when I say hit it, just like tear down that road, man.
We're lowriders, man.
What's that mean?
We ride slow and low.
Okay, have it your way. Take it slow, man.
Years down the road, of course, my grandkids helping me and stuff. I've explained to them by the time they're 18 years old, this is going to be a beautiful area, and they'll really enjoy it and appreciate it. It's all for the community. It's one of the blight areas that I've seen since I was a kid, and I came here when I was 6 years old. I'm 55 now, and I've always kind of wanted to do something like this for the community.
I'm just working in a deli. I'm trying to save up money, but it's really hard because, as soon as I get it, it's gone. And, I'm just trying to move forward, but it's really hard. I've lost all opportunity for an education at this point, and I can't get a professional job. I work for minimum wage, and I'm just surviving now.
So I want you to do this reenactment where you get in your car and you do that.
I'm sorry, I can't. I have a car, but I don't have any insurance and I can't afford tags.